On August 20th, a man gets the opportunity to erase the thoughts of all the disrespectful fans across the world from even ever thinking about calling him Leon Scott once again. He gets to dissipate the memory of the two-piece and the soda written all over his face. He gets an opportunity to be known as the welterweight champion of the world. But in front of him is a man that's known to many of you guys as the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, and a man that has already beaten him before. His plate is full. If he's not able to clean that plate off, it will be tossed in his face like a two-piece in the soda meal. UFC 278, strap your boots. Let's get into it.
The teller, the teller, the teller.
It's another day. Left jab, right jab. This is MMA. Mixed martial arts, quick body parts, undefeated when I pick 'em. Who the champ, who the victim? Looking in my crystal ball, I predict the winner. Never stop fighting. If you lose, keep your chin up. Know how the game go. I'm a smart fella. Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller, the teller, the teller.
What is up, you guys? UFC 278. We have the welterweight championship of the world on the line. Of course, a rematch between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. Now, a lot has changed since the first time these two men have fought. They have evolved in major ways. Of course, Usman is much more dangerous on the feet. Leon Edwards has fine-tuned his striking very much as well. This fight should play out a little bit differently in one way or another. It might still have the same outcome, but we should see a different fight on tape or watching the fight live. We should see a little bit of a different fight if you guys catch my drift there. I'm excited for this fight card. The fight's taking place in Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City, a beautiful city. I've been there a couple times. I had the pleasure to go skiing out there back in the day, and they got blessed with an awesome fight card. We really got some cool fights to talk about. And of course, the main event topping it off. So we're going to be jumping into this fight card here in a second. You guys know how we do it. We start at the bottom. We work our way all the way towards the top of the card. And we talk about how we see these fights going down, most importantly, from a betting perspective. If you're new to the channel, I appreciate you guys stopping by. Hit that subscribe button. All you guys, if you could, please hit that like button for me. It really means a lot to me. And catch me on all my social media. On Instagram, MMA Fortune Teller _. On Twitter, The MMA Teller. And speaking of my social media, if you guys didn't see this bad boy, now remember, I'm not doing recaps anymore at the beginning of my breakdown videos. They have their own segment. So UFC San Diego obviously has already been posted here on the channel. If you guys would like, go check it out. We went a perfect 5 for 5 with my bets on the card. So all my official plays hit. And most importantly, we're talking about great value on the plays that we hit. We hit a plus 300 play on Marlon Vera to win that fight via knockout. We had Marlon Vera at plus 175 to win the fight inside the distance. We also had 2 plays on Josh Quinlan. We had him straight up, and we also had him to get a knockout. Obviously, both fighters getting devastating knockouts. And then we also had a 2.5 unit play on Azamat Mirzakhanov. So just wanted to brush upon that. Obviously, I was ecstatic. It was a giant night for me from a betting standpoint. Almost 8 units profited. And, this was me going nuts at the Dolphins game as I was watching the fights on my phone. And watching my Dolphins also come through. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was crazy. The Dolphins should have lost the game, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hit the post with their game-winning field goal. So the Dolphins win by 2 instead of losing by 1. And all of that happened pretty much simultaneously with Vera getting that knockout there in the 4th round. So I was hyped up, as you guys can see. And, I had some Jameson in my system and a couple brewskis. And it was a great night. So I'm hoping we can make this upcoming Saturday another great night betting, and I'm thinking that we're going to do that. I think we got some spots to work with, and I think that's what we got to get done. So let's get to it. Let's go slide over to UFC 278. Let's get into it. First fight of the card, we have Victor Altamirano taking on Daniel da Silva. Daniel da Silva, the young Brazilian, has had a tough road since joining the UFC. 2 losses via being finished. In the first fight, he got knocked out by Molina. In the second fight, he got caught in that nasty knee bar by Francisco Figueiredo, who's also fighting on this fight card. Victor Altamirano, a tough and unorthodox fighter in the division. He's had a lot of close fights. His last 2 fights, fighting Carlos Candelario, he squeaked by with a split decision victory there. A lot of people thought he should have lost that fight. It was close. He was doing more damage, but also did get taken down quite a bit. And then in his UFC debut, I thought that he won this fight, and then he didn't get the nod there. So I guess, it's a little bit of karma there going back and forth, but he dropped the close fight to Carlos Hernandez. And I thought he did more damage in that fight and should have got the nod. Either way, Victor is a very tricky fighter, like I said. Throws a lot of unorthodox types of kicks as he's bobbing and weaving with his head left and right. He'll kind of flick up the body kick. Has decent power in his hands for the division, in my opinion. He lands the mark quite often. He's a wild dude. He's working on his takedown defense. I mean, I guess you could technically say that's a little bit of a hole in his game. We've seen him taken down. But as of recently in his last fight, he showed to jump right back up like a spider monkey, and he was looking good there. So I think that he's a promising fighter. He has the makings to be an entertaining fighter in the division, and I think he should hang around. And then you have his opponent, Daniel da Silva. I don't know if I could say the same about Daniel da Silva, if I'm being honest. I know he's still very young, and there's a lot of room for growth. He had a very padded record coming into the UFC, first and foremost. In his UFC debut, he actually had a good start to that fight. He showed to be pretty aggressive and showed to have some solid BJJ skills. He was going for the armbar and just looked to be a guy that's pretty polished down on the mat. He knew what he was doing there. Wasn't able to secure that submission, but looked decent there against Jeff Molina. But after he wasn't able to pull off that submission, he kind of hit a brick wall. He got beat down there in the mat a little bit to end the first round, then came out in the second round, got starched, and he just like froze up. His hands were down low and just was a baseball sitting on a tee. Almost literally. I mean, his head was just sitting right there, and Jeff Molina took complete advantage of that situation and knocked him out. So, Altamirano is going to be about 5 years older. I think that is a plus for him. I think that Daniel da Silva still has a lot to learn in the cage, where you got a guy like Altamirano that's starting to catch his groove. I think he's really getting comfortable in there. He's more of a grown man and only has 12 professional fights, so it's not like he has a lot of mileage on him. I think there's a couple things that point towards Altamirano's way. I could see Altamirano landing the mark in this fight, landing some big shots, and potentially getting that knockout. If we're going to talk about Altamirano dropping the ball here, maybe he gets a little wild with his head movement. We saw Dominic Cruz doing that this past weekend, dipping and dodging, and got hit with the head kick. Maybe Daniel da Silva catches him leaning one way, cracks him with the shot, and maybe Daniel da Silva can pull off a submission. Like I said, he's shown some promise there, but seems to fizzle out early. So if Daniel da Silva is going to get the job done, I think it needs to be early in this fight, and I'm gonna lean more so towards the route that Victor Altamirano is just a little bit too tough for him and ends up taking over this fight as it goes on. From a betting standpoint, let's pull up the line in this fight. Right now, Victor Altamirano is a -200. He is a 2-1 favorite over on Bovada, with the comeback on Daniel da Silva at +164. I would say even with Victor Altamirano being up there a little bit, with that line being a little high, I would still rather play him at a -200 line, in my opinion, than take Daniel da Silva at +164. The line's a little bit juicy, but at the same time, he seems to be a very questionable fighter, and you could just be throwing your money right out the window, quite honestly, when you're playing Daniel da Silva. So give me Victor Altamirano, and I could see him getting a knockout in the second round, landing a crisp shot, similarly to what Jeff Molina did. Aoriqileng taking on Jay Perrin. Jay Perrin coming off a loss in his UFC debut, where he took on, in my opinion, the talented Mario Batista. I do believe that he is a talented fighter and a little bit under the radar these days. I think that he's going to start to catch some notoriety over the next couple of years. So that was a tough fight for Perrin to make his debut on. And Perrin, he's a decently well-rounded fighter. He's technically sound and whatnot. Seems to be missing a little bit of edginess to his game. He doesn't really have that one thing that he does really, really good. He's just kind of a well-rounded fighter. He's not necessarily a fighter that you can go in there and just exploit his takedown defense, or a fighter that you can go in there and really just style on the feet. I mean, he's tough. He'll hang around there. And I think that's what we kind of saw in the Batista fight. The Mongolian murderer, coming off a big win where he beat down Cameron Else, really was able to outstrike him in that fight and break him down, getting the victory there. Before that, had 2 tough losses in a row. Of course, the controversial fight of him and Durden, where Durden had some things to say at the end of the fight, and some of you guys didn't like that there. I saw that Aoriqileng felt that he won that fight and the judges were off. That was not the case. I just broke down that tape again. Watched that fight. I broke down some tape on that, and he definitely lost that fight. That was not his best showing. Something you need to keep in mind, though, Aoriqileng was fighting down at the flyweight division, and then in his last fight, he came up to the bantamweight division, where, in my opinion, he looked much better physically and from a performance standpoint as well. In the cage, he looked much better, and I think that's where he should stay, and obviously that's what he's doing here, fighting in the bantamweight division. He's 5'7", as is Jay Perrin. Pretty much identical here. Both men 69-inch reach. Both men 29 years old. These guys match up quite nicely here. And how do I see this fight going down? I think that Perrin is game. I think he's a game fighter. But there's a couple different factors here that point me towards Aoriqileng's way. I think that he'll be a little bit quicker on the feet, a little bit more diverse with his striking. I like the fact that he has more fights inside the octagon. I feel that he'll be a little bit more comfortable in the cage. He's starting to get real confident in himself, and we saw that in his last fight. Meanwhile, you got a guy in Perrin that really, like I said, got beaten down by Batista in his debut, so you got to wonder where his mental is. I know he's a very mentally tough fighter, but still, I think these guys are on different wavelengths coming into the cage this upcoming Saturday. The fight may play out closely. Might play out very closely. I think there's a possibility for that. But I also think there's a possibility that Aoriqileng continues to show rapid growth in his game, and he showcases himself in a really nice way and goes out there and hurts Perrin. Not even saying he necessarily stops him, but maybe he hurts him and really just wins this fight convincingly. I can see this fight going a couple of different ways, but the most likely scenario that I will say is I'm going to take Aoriqileng to win this fight 29-28. I'm going to actually say that Perrin squeaks a round off, but I think that Aoriqileng should win at least 2 rounds. But I think that there's some question marks going into this fight. Like I said, with Perrin having that tough debut, I don't know how many weeks he had training leading up to that fight. I think that was a little bit of a short camp for him. I think he comes into this fight ready to go, and there's potential for this fight to play out a little bit closer. But still, give me Aoriqileng. Now, from a betting standpoint, he's a minus 170 favorite with the comeback on Perrin at plus 140. I feel that line is very accurate. I've been analyzing that line. I've been looking at it, and I think that that's an accurate line. That's pretty much where I have the fight capped myself. So from a betting perspective, it's kind of a tough way to go either way. I think that line's pretty accurate, but I would like Aoriqileng. Qileng Iori, however you want to say it. I know the names are all they say him this way, they say him that way. I guess we can call him Qileng Iori. I would rather take him at the minus 170 line, I guess, if I had to make a play there over Jay Perrin. I want to see what these guys look like at the weigh-ins. I want to see what they look like squaring off across from each other. But give me Qileng Iori. Amir Albazi taking on Francisco Figueiredo, of course, the brother of Davison Figueiredo, who is coming off a big victory. We just talked about it a little bit ago, where he was able to pull that knee bar on the young and inexperienced Daniel Da Silva. It's interesting too, because I didn't mention this, but Daniel Da Silva is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. We talked about some of the skills he has there, but the way that he left his leg in that scramble, the way he left it out there and allowed Francisco to capitalize on that, just kind of shows you where his fighter IQ is at times. We talked about how he's a little bit young and immature, but Francisco Figueiredo, very similar to his brothers and similar to his brother in a lot of way, just a worse version of him. He's explosive. He does have some powerful striking, likes to rip that body kick. Before that victory we just talked about, he did take a loss to Malcolm Gordon. That's not a good look. You don't really want to go in there and lose to a guy like Malcolm Gordon, in my opinion. And then before that, he did have that victory over Jerome Rivera, which you can't really gauge that so well either, because Jerome Rivera is a very below level fighter. He's not a UFC caliber fighter. He's kind of a fighter that snuck in between the cracks and made his way into the octagon. Back when the flyweight division was a little bit more lacking. These days, a guy like Jerome Rivera can't hang around. So it's really hard to judge a fighter like Francisco Figueiredo, in my opinion. Came into the UFC off a draw, and then you're talking about victories over two below level fighters, and then that loss to Malcolm Gordon. So, you don't really know what you're getting from Francisco, in my opinion, these days. Now, I did pick him to defeat Daniel Da Silva. Not a lot of people picked him there. I showed a little bit of faith in the guy. He did come through. But this fight that he's facing this upcoming Saturday is a different type of fight. I've been pretty high on Amir Albazi. You guys know that. I really like his grappling. I really like his jiu-jitsu. He's one of the very few fighters that have gone in there over the past years and pulled off a triangle choke off his back down on the mat. I mean, that is one of my favorite submissions to see. It's one of my favorite submissions to pull off behind the guillotine. You guys know I love my guillotine. But I really do like that sub, and it's just a submission that you rarely see pulled off inside the octagon in MMA in general these days. So I thought that was pretty crafty the way he pulled that off, and that was against, speaking of Malcolm Gordon, that was against Malcolm Gordon. So a lower level fighter, but a fighter that did just go out there and take out Francisco Figueiredo. Some MMA math there, not that it means too much. And then in Amir's last fight, he took out Zhalgas Zhimagulov, who is a tough, decently well-rounded fighter there. So Amir Albazi has not been that active. I think that's the one thing that you can say in a negative light about him. He hasn't been the most active fighter. But I know that he has plans to be much more active in the next couple years here. And he is a promising fighter. He's only 28 years old, fighting out of England. I believe he trains over at London Shoot Fighters. MVPs over there. You got a couple talented fighters from over there across the pond. And 14-1. I got to go with Amir Albazi. I'm thinking he's going to pull off this fight, or he's going to really solidify this fight with his grappling. I think on the feet, I wouldn't be surprised if it played out a little bit closely on the feet. And but I also wouldn't be surprised, or I would be surprised if this fight doesn't go down to the mat at some point in time. I expect this fight to go down to the mat at some point in time. Figueiredo is not necessarily afraid to go there either, and I think Albazi will shine more so down there. I could see him pulling off a sub or just dominating the transitions and winning the fight there. So I do like Albazi. He's a minus 425 favorite with the comeback on Figueiredo at plus 315. This is going to be a very common narrative when we talk about these betting lines throughout the card. There's a lot of high favorites, which makes this fight card a little bit tricky. But I do have Amir Albazi, and I think that he could even pull off a rear naked choke here, potentially, or something like that. This is an interesting fight, though. Like I said, Francisco Figueiredo is a hard fighter to gauge, and we'll see what he looks like this upcoming Saturday. But give me Albazi all day. AJ Fletcher taking on Ange Loosa. Of course, Ange Loosa, we first got familiar with him on Dana White's Contender Series, where he took a tough loss in an entertaining fight against the very talented Jack Della Maddalena. We now know that Jack is the real deal. So when you take a look at that loss, that decision loss, it really doesn't look that bad these days. And then I don't know how many of you guys were watching the fights about 3 months ago over at XMMA. They show those fights live on YouTube for free. I believe they do. And I remember seeing that fight where he was able to take out the old veteran and John Howard, ex-UFC fighter. John Howard, up there in age, like I said. I mean, I don't really know how much merit that victory holds. But Ange Loosa is a talented striker. You know, of course, the striking is his bread and butter. That's his background. He's been working over at Sanford MMA. I know he's been working over there for a while now, rounding out his game. I know he surrounds himself with some of the best fighters in the world. Of course, that will not do your game harm. It's only going to make you a better fighter. And you should expect to see a better version of him every time he goes out there. Again, when you have that type of company, it's going to excel your game. He's a good athlete. And speaking of being a good athlete, his opponent is really a good athlete himself. The Ghost, AJ. These men are the same height, but AJ has a little bit of a different look to him. He kind of has those T-Rex arms, and in fact, I know he does have a little bit of a reach disadvantage here, a 7-inch reach disadvantage, even though they're both 5'10". And you see it too. You see it when you break down tape on them. AJ has those T-Rex arms. And I think that could hurt him a little bit here in the striking exchanges, which is where this fight should take place for the majority of the time it goes on. Now Fletcher is explosive. We talked about him being an athlete. I mean, if you didn't see the flying knee that he landed on Dana White's Contender Series, go pull that tape up. It was ridiculous. Jumped up, threw that knee right down the pipe and hit his opponent right on the chin. Definitely looks like he carries some pop in his hands when he lands, when he's able to get on the inside and rip those hooks. I mean, he does carry some pop. I think he has the potential to string off some knockouts in the UFC as long as he hangs around. I mean, you look at some of his fights before getting into the UFC. We're talking about a fighter that goes in there and finishes a lot of his fights. We'll talk about the level of competition. Not a really a high level of competition, but he's going in there, starching these guys, submitting some of these guys as well, and which is going to point me to an edge that I see, a potential edge that he has in this fight, and that is I do think that he should be the better wrestler and the better grappler. But again, he falls in love with his striking as well, and I wouldn't be too shocked if he goes in there and lets this fight take place a little bit too long on the feet, where Ange Loosa might be able to cause some harm to him. But I'm not positive that Fletcher doesn't go out there and hold his own in the striking exchanges, and it plays out very close. That topped with the potential for Fletcher to have the better wrestling and maybe solidify some takedowns. I'm leaning towards Fletcher getting the job done via decision. I think he wins 2 out of 3 rounds, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if Ange Loosa pulls off this fight. Ange Loosa is a plus 132 underdog. I think that there's more value on Loosa at plus 132. I do. I think there's more value on him there than the minus 155 on Fletcher. I feel like that line, a little torn on this, man, because Fletcher, I like some things that he does, but I don't know. At minus 155, I'm not necessarily crazy about it personally. I don't think, as of right now, I would have to see something. I would have to see them at the stare downs, and I would have to see Fletcher's arms actually not looking like they're 7 inches shorter than Loosa's. Instead of him looking like a T-Rex, I need to see him looking like a knuckle dragger with his arms hanging low. And I don't think that's what we're going to see. So more value on Loosa, but I am going to take AJ Fletcher to win the fight. My gut tells me he takes 2 or 3 rounds, gets a couple takedowns, as long as his cardio doesn't give up on him, because his cardio at times is not the best either. Towards the late rounds, sometimes he slows down a bit. But I am still going to take Fletcher to win the fight. He's going to take 2 of the 3 rounds. We've got another rematch on this card. We got Miranda Maverick taking on Shanna Young. Of course, Miranda Maverick did defeat Shanna back in the day. Miranda Maverick is only 25 years old, which if you didn't realize, she's still a spring chicken. She just turned 25 years old. So fear the Miranda Maverick, or however you want to say that nickname, Miranda Fear the Maverick. She's still a promising fighter. Of course, she did just have a big hiccup as of recently. The Macy Barber fight, we know how talented Macy is. I thought that Maverick won that fight, and it was close though. But really, the fight that I'm talking about was the Erin Blanchfield fight, where Erin Blanchfield, not only did she lose to her, but the way that Blanchfield went in there and handled Maverick was a little bit surprising, and kind of made me look at Maverick a little bit differently. But I don't know if we should look at Maverick so much differently, or we should really start to respect the game that Blanchfield possesses. Maverick did bounce back with the victory over Sabina Mazo, went in there, pulled off the rear naked choke, gaining some of that respect back. And talk about gaining respect. Shayna Young went in there and just put a beat down on Gina Mazzani. Gina Mazzani, no disrespect, but I don't have too much respect for her game in the octagon these days. I think that she's got away with some decent performances before, but when push came to shove, we really saw what she's about inside the cage, and she's a fighter that you can go in there and finish like that. You can actually go in and finish her in a variety of ways, as we've seen, but if you want to see Shayna working on her car here, getting dirty, I mean, she's a tough chick. We know that she's muscular, she's strong, but you know who else is muscular and strong? Miranda Maverick. And like I said, Miranda Maverick already has a victory over her. I do expect Miranda to go out here, get the job done once again. And I'm even leaning towards her for getting the finish here via submission. And the first time they fought, she did pull off the submission as well. I think that Maverick's only a better version of herself since that fight. And, I don't really know how much Shayna has evolved with her game since that fight that took place in 2019, 3 years ago. Miranda Maverick at the time was, 22 years old. Well, the Schmanimal was, take a look at how old she was just so we could judge that. I mean, she's 31. I mean, she was pretty much in the prime of her career at that point when they fought. I mean, 28 years old. I think this goes worse for her this time around. And yes, Miranda Maverick is shorter, but still has a half-inch reach advantage. We know how Miranda Maverick is built. She's a good fighter, and I will take her to win the fight. Now, from a betting perspective, you already know what's coming at you guys right now. Miranda Maverick is going to be a big favorite here. I already knew that as soon as I saw this fight was announced. Miranda Maverick, a minus 500 favorite. The comeback at plus 365 on Shayna Young. If you're going to do something with this fight, I think that you would have to throw it in a parlay. The line's pretty high. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend to any of you guys that you really waste any money on Shayna Young at a plus 365. I personally don't see the value there. I just don't think she gets the job done. We got a sleeper fight here. Sean, the Sniper Woodson, taking on Luis Saldaña. Both these fighters, entertaining strikers, unorthodox type of strikers. Sean Woodson, an MMA fighter that really implements a solid boxing game inside the cage. Really knows how to work his hands. I mean, this is a fighter you could tell is talented with his boxing. He's been working the body as of recently. We know that he has that crazy frame for the division. He's 6'2" with a 79-inch reach. He's coming into this fight with a 6-inch reach advantage. I like watching Sean Woodson fight. He's an interesting dude. If you see him here back in the day, I mean, you see that he used to be a big boy. He lost a lot of weight, and I think he was willing to challenge Francis Ngannou to a fight here back in the day. I don't think he actually would want that smoke, but it's just kind of funny that, I mean, I'm assuming he's a heavyweight there, but Sean Woodson, he's 9-1. He did have that one setback against Julian Rosa. That's a fight that he got a little bit too cocky in and got caught with the shot, and then ended up getting caught with the Darce choke after he was hurt and wobbled in that fight, but bounced back very nicely since. Went out there, defeated Yusuf Zalal and Colin Anglin. And the Colin Anglin fight really looked good. The way he was able to work the body with his boxing, again, just showcasing how silky smooth he is with his boxing. Luis Saldaña, first and foremost, I do not believe that he won this fight against Jordan Griffin. So, in my opinion, I want to make that clear that he should have been really only one of his last 3 fights going into this fight, but went out there and defeated Bruno Souza, and that was a fight that was close as well. Lost to Austin Lingo. I'm not really that high in Austin Lingo. When you really analyze what Luis Saldaña has done on paper, to me, it hasn't been that impressive. The thing is, Luis Saldaña is an entertaining fighter to watch. I think the UFC, they like that. He's cheap, obviously, coming off the show. I'm sure his contract isn't that big. He goes out there, he puts on a show, and I think the UFC likes a fighter like him to throw on a card and just know that his fight will play out in an entertaining way. And that's exactly what I expect to see in this fight. I expect this fight to be very entertaining, but I do expect Sean Woodson to be getting his hand raised when it's all said and done. I think Sean Woodson lands the cleaner shots. Saldaña kind of doesn't know how to gauge his gas tank the best. Sometimes he throws too many spinning attacks. He starts to slow down. I could see Sean Woodson just creeping up on him, using proper footwork and just kind of boxing him up, and potentially even getting a stoppage if Luis Saldaña's hands are low or his footwork's out of alignment and he's just kind of off. I could see Woodson clipping him with the shot right on the chin because he's an accurate fighter, an accurate striker, and he has that name, the Sniper, for a reason. Give me Sean Woodson. He's a minus 335. It's another high line, guys. It's another high line. I don't want to get reckless just telling you guys throw all these fights in parlays, but I mean, I'm definitely taking Woodson to win this fight. I'm not really sure how much value I see in Saldaña. I mean, if you want to get frisky and you want to throw some dog plays out, I mean, you're grabbing a fat line at plus 255. But I just think that Sean Woodson's going to win this fight. I really do. I think he's, like I said, I think he even potentially gets that knockout here. So it's tricky. Maybe you want to throw Sean Woodson in a parlay. Lucie Pudilová taking on Yanan Wu. Lucie, if you guys remember her, had an initial stint in the UFC some years back. The UFC did part ways with her. She was still very young when they let her go, and she went out, put some work in, and she made her way back to the octagon. More of a striking-based fighter. Of course, rounding her game out these days. She's 28 now, but she came into the UFC as a striker. And take a look at what she did. I mean, she She came into the UFC, dropped the fight to Lena Landsberg, a respectable opponent, took out Ji Young Kim and Sarah Moras, lost to Irene Aldana, was a split decision loss. You guys know Irene Aldana is a very good fighter, but back in 2018, do understand that Irene Aldana was a very green fighter as well. Lost to Liz Carmouche, Antonina Shevchenko. That one doesn't look the best. You know, the fact that she was submitted down there on the mat against Antonina, not the best look. And then the loss to Justine Quiche. Some of those don't really look that good, but since then, she has won 5 of her last 6 fights, with her only loss by way of Thalita Bernardo. If you guys remember Bernardo, an ex-UFC fighter, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She's a good fighter that I expect to make her way back to the UFC here in the near future if she wants to. She doesn't stay that active, but she's a good fighter. She really exploits her opponents grappling if they're not up to par, and she's a decent fighter there. So, the loss doesn't look too bad. Do take note also, 2 of Pudilova's wins were against the same girl, Marta Welajic, both via split decision. And when you really analyze Marta, I know it says 5-3, but do understand 2 losses are by way of Lucie Pudilova, and then the other loss is by way of a fighter that's a respectable opponent as well. So kind of analyze it like that. Yanan Wu, a striking first fighter. You see her putting in work over at Jackson Wink. She really moves around the cage a lot when she strikes. She can give her opponents some problems with her footwork and whatnot. If they're not able to figure the puzzle out, I mean, she can go out there and score some points and take some rounds. Pudilova is a decent striker as well, though. And the way I see this fight going down, I expect this fight to be a striking matchup. And I got to favor Pudilova, because when you break down tape on Pudilova, you know that she really falls in love with her jab. She's going to have a 1.5 inch reach advantage there with her wing, her arms and whatnot. And she really likes to pump that jab nonstop. I could really see her jabbing up Yanan Wu, bloodying her up, hitting the nose up and whatnot, and scoring some points there. Lucie Pudilova is not the quickest and most athletic fighter. At times she's a little slow with her movement, but it's decently technical. But I can kind of see her just kind of closing the distance on Yanan Wu, as Yanan Wu's kind of maybe a little quicker, moving around and whatnot. But Pudilova will land a little bit more impactful shots, and I think she'll score some more points. I think she'll win a close fight, maybe a 29-28, with one round being really close that could have went either way. This might be a split decision type of fight. But I got to go with Pudilova. I think that Pudilova comes back to the UFC. You see her celebrating with the balloons here. I think she comes back to the UFC and she'll be celebrating with the victory, and she'll be very happy. Now, from a betting perspective, Lucie Pudilova is at -145 with the comeback on Yanan Wu at +120. Finally, a fight that has a decent line that we can kind of make our decision on. I am going to go with the favorite still in Pudilova, but this is a fight that's a lot closer. It's just, again, a lot of high lines on this fight card. From a betting standpoint, I would like to see Pudilova come down a little bit. It would be nice to grab her around -130, -125 if it does come down. Not necessarily sure that's going to be the case. If anything, it probably even goes up. I think we'll see more action on Pudilova. She'll probably settle in at a -160 on Bovada, in my opinion. That's how I see the line moving. But Lucie Pudilova to win this fight via unanimous decision, 29-28. Jared Gordon taking on Leonardo Santos. Leonardo Santos, I mean, he's up there in age now. Leonardo Santos is 42 and a half years old. Of course, he had a long layoff from the sport. So, I mean, his body did have some time to rest. If you guys remember, he kind of had a long hiatus, right? I mean, at one point in time, right, if you look at his 5th fight ago, that was 6 years ago. Took a nice solid, 3-year break before he came back in there against Stevie Ray. Then took another about a year and a month break, long layoff. And then finally he's been a little bit more active as of recently. And, his last 2 fights were very disappointing for him. Of course, the Grant Dawson fight, I thought that he looked pretty good in that Grant Dawson fight, actually. Of course, he was finished almost at the last second of the fight, but I thought that he put on a decent showing of himself. I am very high on Grant Dawson. And Santos had some success in that fight. We know that Santos is a good striker. He's a very accurate striker. He has the jiu-jitsu background. But then you saw him in his last fight against Clay Guida. It was very alarming. I mean, he went out there, put an onslaught on Clay Guida early, but completely gassed himself out to the point where the Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist got rear naked choke submitted by Clay Guida. But if you understand how that fight played out, it wasn't even about him subbing Santos. I mean, it was just Santos was just absolutely gassed, could barely even raise his arms up. And Guida basically was playing with the fly. You know, he caught the fly, he was ripping his wings off and just kind of flicking him in his big red eye. I mean, that's what it was kind of looking like in there. Now, he could have did whatever he wanted to Santos, really. I'll tell you what, a fighter that you do not want to gas out against is Jared Gordon, because Jared Gordon can push a pace like no other. He will continuously come forward. If there's a hole in Jared Gordon's game, it could be his chin at times. Sometimes his defensive game doesn't hold up. We've seen him clipped. We've seen him put out a couple times throughout his career. I think that if Santos is going to take this fight, he's going to have to do something early like he likes to do. But he can't just hurt Gordon and let Gordon regain his wits. He's going to have to put him away. He's going to have to hurt him and sub him or really put him out, because if he doesn't, he'll hurt Gordon, and Gordon will regain his strength, and he'll push forward, and then he'll absolutely brutalize Santos. And in fact, that's kind of how I see this fight going. That's if Santos can even do that damage up front. Maybe he lands a couple nice shots, but at the end of the day, I see Gordon just trucking through one way or another and implementing that game plan where he will just start to land some shots on the feet, but really walk you down, trip you down to the mat, get on top of you, and rain some nasty ground and pound. You know, he loves his elbows. While he's in the guard or while he's on top of you, he'll smash you up. And that's how I see this fight going down. I think that Gordon potentially gets a finish here, like a finish where he's just putting a lot of volume on him and just bloodies him up, and you see Santos kind of crumble a little bit late in the fight, maybe in the third round. I know Gordon's coming off a loss to Grant Dawson, but again, like I was just talking about Grant Dawson before, I have a lot of respect for him, and I'm not really too worried about that. Before, had the victory against Joe Selecki. You guys know I'm very high on Joe Selecki as well, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ace is Selecki, so he's been in there with some talented grapplers before, has Gordon, so Santos shouldn't be nothing new to him. Take a look at the betting line here. Jared Gordon, another high line, he's a minus 310. What are you going to do with it? You're going to throw it in a parlay? You're going to take Gordon to get that finish? I haven't seen some of these specific fights. We haven't seen a lot of the prop bets for finishes and whatnot opened up. So we'll keep an eye on those. Right now, Bovada doesn't have any of those open. But that would be the way you would have to go. Or if some of you guys feel there's value in Santos, if Santos can clean things up with his cardio and his management of his gas tank and whatnot, Santos throws some nice, clean, straight shots, and he does have some solid Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some really good Jiu-Jitsu. But if that gas tank doesn't hold up, he's in for a long night. One important note that I want to make, this fight is taking place in the light heavyweight division. Harry Hunsucker is coming down in weight. I think this is a smart move for him. His physique and whatnot is more suited for the light heavyweight division. So I want to make that clear before we jump into this prediction, that I didn't really touch upon that as much. Tyson Pedro makes the walk back down to the octagon. He will be facing off with Harry Hunsucker, a.k.a. Honey Harry Sucker, a.k.a. Harry Honeysuckle. You can mix it up a variety of ways. But one thing that you do need to realize, although Honeysuckles has only won one of his last 4 fights and has been knocked out a couple times, right, in those losses, he still is a dangerous opponent. In all seriousness, Honey Harry Sucker, this is a guy, man. You want to pull up a fight on him, pull up that Corey Moon fight. It's on YouTube, and you'll see that he has some pop in his hands, and he actually has some decent boxing. But again, in his losses, very prone to being finished. Just came off a knockout loss to Justin Tafa. Before that, knocked out by Tai Tuivasa. We know that Tuivasa is a beast. And then before that, on Dana White's Contender Series, he was kind of overmatched from a physical standpoint from the size of Jared Vandera. Jared got on top of him, right, and kind of smashed him up. But he even showed to be tough in that fight and that he was willing to throw down on the feet, and he was looking for the knockout himself on the feet. I actually like this guy, Harry, and I'm glad that the UFC is giving him another opportunity because I think that he's worthy of it. Like I said, this is the type of fighter I would not want to fight this guy in a bar. I'll tell you that much. He seems to me like the type of guy that has put some guys out back in his day over there in Kentucky. Tyson Pedro, some of the dopest tattoos in the game. Tyson Pedro, if you guys didn't remember, I mean, he had a long layoff. You look at some of his more recent fights, we're talking about 4.5 years ago, 4 years ago. And then he still 4 years ago, basically over 3.5 years ago, when he lost to Shogun Rua, an aged Shogun Rua. But then he came back in a major way, and he did get a nasty finish over Ike Villanueva. Ike Villanueva is not a UFC caliber fighter, and we all know that. I've been saying that for a while. So I've been saying Ike Villanueva should be fighting over in BKFC for some time. But Tyson Pedro went out there, and he did what he needed to do. So we got to give him respect in that aspect. Tyson Pedro kind of has almost like a basketball frame. He's very long. He's very rangy. He's been working the leg kicks from the outside very well. In fact, that's what he did in that last fight. If you watch the tape in that fight, was really hammering the leg kicks and striking from the outside, which is something that you want to see. And he kind of reminds me of name stuff on my mind. Ronda Rousey's husband, Travis Brown, kind of reminds me of a Travis Brown to an extent. I mean, they're different, but at the same time, they do something similarly. And those are fighters that really need to strike from the outside. They should not be in the inside, throwing down like that, especially not with a guy like Harry, because Harry actually just completed his first bar muscle up today. In all seriousness, shout out to him and big respect. That's not easy to do. It took me a while to be able to do one of those. And if you guys don't think I could do one, put some money up and I'll show you a video of me ripping one of those at the gym. But they're not easy to do, and you got to practice the technique. It's more of a technique thing with that. But he's a big boy, though, too. He's not like me, 185 pounds, pulling myself up. I mean, he's pulling up. Let's see what he's pulling up over here. Pulling up roughly 240 pounds. So he is a big boy. Pedro's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. Like I said, he's going to want to strike from the outside. He's an inch taller. He needs to use leg kicks from the outside, and he needs to be patient and look to land that sniper shot from the outside. If he chooses to engage here and a hairy type of fight with Harry Hunsucker, he could get caught with a knockout shot. I'm telling you guys right now, mark my words, Harry will have potential to get a knockout in this fight. I don't necessarily see that happening. I think that Tyson could also mix in some grappling. I think that's the route he should go. From what I've been hearing and some research I've done, Tyson actually has some underrated grappling. He's been working on that for some time, and I wouldn't mind to see him get this fight down to the mat, where I think that he could be a step ahead of Harry and get maybe a ground and pound finish down there. So I do got Tyson Pedro to win the fight. He is a giant favorite. He's a minus 850 right now on Bovada.lv, with Harry Hunsucker at plus 525. So that line's pretty crazy. I wouldn't recommend doing anything with Pedro. And I would have to say the value is on Harry Hunsucker at a plus 525 line. For sure. I mean, I don't even recommend that you throw Pedro in a parlay at a line like that. He's a fighter that's been inactive. We just saw him take a loss to an aged Shogun. We talked about some of his losses, and Harry can crack. Go pull up that Corey Moon, not to be confused with Carrie Moon. Shout out to you guys that know who Carrie Moon is and her melons. But Corey Moon is a fighter that got starched by Harry Hunsucker. So pull that tape up. Pull the tape up on Carrie Moon and Corey Moon, and you won't regret either one. All right, so my pick is going to be Tyson Pedro. I'm cracking myself up over here, but the line is crazy. It's a minus 850. Go go with the value on Harry, or just stay away from that fight. Marcin Tybura taking on Alexandr Romanov. Alexander King Kong Romanov, one of the more entertaining fighters to watch in the game these days. The name King Kong says it all. He goes out there and he just straight up smashes his opponents. You got to enjoy watching a fighter like him that has that wrestling pedigree, but doesn't implement it in a boring way. He gets on top of guys and just looks to smash their heads through the canvas. I became a big fan of Alexandr Romanov's. But I'm gonna keep it real with you guys here. We're gonna talk the nitty gritty here because Marcin Tybura is a very underrated fighter and a very well-rounded fighter. I know he's coming off a loss, but look who he just lost to: Alexander Volkov, one of the best heavyweight fighters on planet Earth, one of the best heavyweight strikers of all time. Do understand that. So the point that I want to make here is that, first and foremost, you already know that Romanov's coming in as a big favorite once again. That's all he does. He comes into his fights as massive favorites because when he goes out there and pulls off the victory, for the majority of the time, it's in devastating fashion. It just kind of inflates the odds. It's not the lines on him can be a little off at times, in my opinion. A win's a win. It doesn't necessarily matter if you go out there and kill the opponent or if you go out there and you squeak by it with a win, right? And yes, it's very impressive, and it's awesome if you have money on him and he goes out there and it's quick. You don't have to stress out. But I don't necessarily think that this line is that accurate, to be honest, because a fight that we got to pull up. Well, there's a couple factors I'm going to bring up here. So first and foremost, if you take a look at some of the victories that Alexandr Romanov has had as of recently, Chase Sherman is a below level fighter in the division. Jared Vandera, not too impressed with Vandera either. Juan Espino, this is the fight we got to talk about. This is the elephant in the room. Juan Espino should have won that fight. If you guys remember what happened, Alexandr Romanov was starting to gas out. He started off strong. He won the first round. Espino won the second round and was really taking over that fight. And there was I believe it was an eye poke, right? I believe it was an eye poke. I'm trying to remember if it was a groin strike or an eye poke, but either way, I think it was an eye poke. Romanov chose not to continue to fight, and this was in the beginning of the third round, and it was weird. Depending on what state it was in or whatnot, there was a lot of controversy. They ended up going, this is when they first started doing that, I think. They went to the judges' scorecards, where the third round should have been judged with only so much time taking place in that third round, and really it was looking like Espino should have won the fight, because I think he actually, from the limited amount of time of that third round taking place, he did something that was a little bit more of aggression compared to what Romanov did, but somehow they gave the fight to Romanov, which was interesting. Espino was furious, and again, you guys keep an eye on Espino. Espino is a world-class wrestler, a very, very underrated heavyweight fighter. Right now, he's under the radar, and but he kind of exploited Romanov to an extent as far as his cardio goes. I need to know that Romanov has been working on his cardio if I'm going to be putting up big money on him, especially with a line like that. And then especially when you're talking about facing a guy in Marcin Tybura, who I just told you guys is extremely well-rounded. He's an absolute professional. You want to look at what Tybura's been doing as of recently. Coming off that loss to Volkov, but before that was on a very nice win streak. Won 5 fights in a row, taking out Sergey Spivak, Maxime Grishin, Ben Rothwell, Greg Hardy, and Walt Harris, finishing the last 2 fighters as well. He's had some tough losses, but look, former heavyweight champion Fabricio Verdum, he got knocked out by Derek Lewis in a fight that he was winning before slowing down and getting caught. These fights don't look the best. He was knocked out against Sakai and Abdurakhimov, but listen, it's the heavyweight division. You're in there with solid fighters. Anything could happen. Just understand that Marcin Tybura is a good fighter. I've really gained a lot of respect from him throughout the years. And I think that there's an avenue for him to win this fight. And that is, he needs to make Romanov work very hard for those takedowns. He needs to continuously get up to his feet. And he needs to land heavy shots there where he could eventually hurt Romanov bad or solidify late rounds, maybe winning the second and the third round. And I think that Tybura is very live to win this fight. Now, that all being said, I know I'm going to kind of let you guys down here. You guys are probably excited for a dog pick. I'm not going to pick against Romanov here. I'm just making the point that I think the line's off. Romanov, I still feel it's more likely that he gets that he will get takedowns and he'll do some serious work there. I know he's working on his striking. He's only 31 years old, and I know that he's working on his striking, and he does possess power there too. If he clips Tybura in the feet, he could definitely knock him out or hurt him bad. He needs to have been working on his cardio. That has to have been going on, because if he comes in looking like how he looked in that Espino fight, where he gets tired from pushing that pace, and then Tybura is piecing him up, Tybura will have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's an inch taller. He's a big boy, man, and Tybura can fight. I'm still going to be picking Alexandr Romanov, and we'll pull up the line right here. Romanov is a minus 450. So, as I said, I think there's more value on Tybura at plus 325 than a minus 450 line on Romanov. But there's a very real possibility that Romanov goes out there and absolutely ragdolls Tybura early and finishes him in the first round with the ground and pound. So I got a gift for you guys as we look to break down the co-main event of the night, a fight that we're all anticipating so much. And here it goes. It's Merab Dvalishvili taking on Jose Aldo. So how do you like the pronunciation there? Maybe it wasn't perfect, but I know it's damn well better than all the other times I've ever said Merab Davashvili. So, worked on that a little bit for you guys. And I think it's about time that we start getting familiar with saying his name properly, because the machine Merab is a hell of a fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch right now in the division. Coming off a spectacular fight against Marlon Moraes. Of course, he was hurt in that Marlon Moraes fight. If you guys didn't remember, he was clipped on the feet. He was hurt really bad. Although he did show some defensive flaws there in the feet, we also have to gain some respect for his chin, because he took some big shots, and he took them just as you thought that he would. He ate them up and then went right to the wrestling, where he eventually got on top of Moraes and pounded him in devastating fashion to end the first round. And then as they went up, in the second round, they started fresh. Moraes was looking how he has looked towards the late end of his career, where he was just always just out of it. When he got hit and got hurt a little bit, he just was completely out of it. And then Merab was basically, I'll use that analogy again, he was playing with the fly after he ripped the wings off, and he was able to land some big shots on him on the feet. And eventually, of course, he broke down Moraes and got the finish there. But I mean, we got to admit, and we got to know that let's be clear, Jose Aldo is a very accurate striker. If Marlon Moraes was able to land those shots on Merab, there's no question that Jose Aldo can land some pinpoint accuracy type of shots and hurt Merab bad. He might be able to finish Merab when he gets him hurt in that type of situation. There's some legit potential for Jose Aldo to get a knockout here, in my opinion. But I also think that if Merab plays this fight a little bit more safely and doesn't engage too much in those striking exchanges, kind of throws a couple, but really is shelled up and starts to hang on Jose, I think that he can steal some rounds with his grappling. He's a phenomenal wrestler. At the same time, Jose Aldo has some of the best takedown defense in the game and in the division. We know that Jose Aldo is very big for the weight class. The former featherweight kingpin, now fighting in the bantamweight division. If he wins this fight, you got to assume he's fighting for the belt next, or he's right up there. He's an absolute legend. We talk about legends. We talked about Dominic Cruz. Let me pay my respect to Jose Aldo, one of my favorite fighters of all time. In fact, I've been on record saying he's my favorite Brazilian fighter, and I stand behind that. Jose Aldo, I've been watching him way since the WEC days, where I saw the Cub Swanson fight live, where he went out there, not live in the arena, but live on TV. Is watching that in college, and I was excited for that fight card. And Aldo just ran out there, hit him with that flying knee. And that's when I really started to pay attention to Aldo. And I used to always tell people, I was like, for people that watch MMA, if you're catching the WEC, you got to watch this fighter named Jose Aldo, because he moves on different wavelengths. And to this day, he's still doing his thing. 3 fights in a row, just took out Rob Font, Pedro Munoz, and Marlon Vera, all respectable opponents that are younger than him. Merab, another young, hungry lion that's coming for him. I've been so torn on my selection here, huh? So I got to make a pick here for you guys. I was going to pick Jose Aldo to win this fight, but I'm not. I'm going to pick Merab Davashvili. Excuse me, I messed it up there now. Merab Davashvili. Excuse me. I forgot how good I said it the first time. I'm thrown off again. But I am going to be picking Merab to win this fight. And the reason why I'm going to pick him to win this fight is I have faith in his chin. And I feel that if Jose lands some big shots here and there, I think that Merab will hold up. And when Merab starts to get tagged up, man, he turns into a Wolverine. And I could see him getting a hold of a body lock on Jose and getting this fight down to the mat. And the longer this fight goes on, I think that it favors Merab. We've seen Jose Aldo kind of start to wilt a little bit later in some of his fights as of recently. The Petr Yan fight, we saw him break down a little bit in that fight. He had a good start in the beginning of that fight, then broke down. And then the Marlon Moraes fight, I thought that he actually won that fight, if I'm being honest. So, I mean, the Petr Yan was the fight that he really kind of slowed down. There's been some fights in the past where he slowed down. I've been watching Jose for a long time. So, I mean, 38 professional fights. I know who he is as a fighter. And if this is a high-paced fight, I think that he's a fighter that could break down a little bit. We saw him break down a little bit in the Max Holloway fights. And of course, let's be clear, any of the losses that Jose Aldo has taken as of recently were all against the best fighters on planet Earth. And I will give him respect in that aspect too. Losing to Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, Petr Yan. I mean, you're talking about the best of the best. So I do have to be clear when we say that, but I'm going to be picking Merab. I told you guys why. Let's go check the betting lines out. Merab is a slight favorite of -122 with Jose coming back at even odds. And basically, you need to pick the fighter that you think is going to win this fight. This isn't a fight where you say, oh, value this, value that. This is a fight where you need to know who's going to win this fight. You got to pick the winner here, flat out. And I think Merab's toughness and wrestling make me just edge him out a little bit more. So give me Merab to win the fight and push his way towards the top of the division. Hey, you guys, I got 2 quick messages for you. If you guys are looking to work with me for my official plays, don't be shy. If you want to reach out to me, shoot me an email, mmafortuneteller@gmail.com, or shoot me a DM on Instagram or Twitter. I got them scrolling there on the bottom. Shoot me a message if you guys want to know my pricing or whatnot. I'd love to work with you guys. We've been absolutely killing it, and I'd love to have you join the team and make some money with me. Besides that, if you also are looking for a new sportsbook, you guys know the routine. I have a good sportsbook called Bovada.lv. If you sign up through to Bovada.lv with my referral link, you will get 2 cards for my official plays that you can use for any fight cards that you want moving forward. All you got to do is reach out to me. Let me send you that referral link. Sign up through my link. You're going to get a bonus in your account. And in my opinion, Bovada.lv is without a doubt the best sportsbook in the industry. Now, is this fight even going to happen? Not trying to jinx it, but I need to see Luke make the walk, man. Luke Rockhold. Luke been hiding under a rock hold. Luke obviously has stepped away from the game. It's been over 3 years since we saw him get knocked out against Jan Blachowicz. I remember that fight very vividly. Before that, he gets knocked out against Yoel Romero. Then Yoel sticks his tongue in his ear, gives him a little tap on the butt. It's been a long time since we've seen the vintage Luke Rockhold. I mean, he did go out there and handle business against David Branch, but the fighter that he was when he took out Chris Weidman 6.5 years ago. Wow, man, 6.5 years ago, that was the night that Conor McGregor knocked out Jose Aldo to become the featherweight champion of the world. That's that one right there, man. It makes me emotional just thinking about that. I can remember where I was watching that fight, man. I was in a different world 6.5 years ago, living a different life. But that fighter that Luke Rockhold was in that fight, I am not willing to believe in the slightest that he is anything of the same these days. He has got very lethargic and slow with his defensive striking. He's there to be hit on the comeback. He's a phenomenal athlete. I think that you see him hitting the pads here right now. You see he puts a lot into his shots, and I think he should be focusing more on hitting and getting out and using his head work. He should be throwing lighter shots and using his head work and make sure that his cardio is phenomenal for this fight. I mean, he looks like he's in great shape. I'm sure it is. But he can go out here and look really good early on, but it's just if he gets a little reckless in there, a little careless, I should say, it only just takes one shot and his hands kind of drop low and he just gets clipped and he'll be crawling around the octagon like he did against Jan Blachowicz. And when he gets knocked out, his knockout losses are some of the most devastating losses that you'll see. We talk about giraffe syndrome. Luke Rockhold, I mean, there's been contradictory reports from different doctors if he has giraffe syndrome or not. And I'm willing to bet that we're going to find out this upcoming weekend, because if he's a little bit too lanky and long with his movements and Paulo Costa hits him with a crisp shot, a crisp old head kick. We saw Paulo Costa throwing some nasty head kicks late in that fight against Marvin Vettori, in that fight. Although he did drop that fight and he was coming in reckless, not on weight and all that. Let's be honest, man, he was tough in that fight and he threw some big time shots. He threw some shots that I think take out a guy like Luke Rockhold. So Paulo looks in phenomenal shape here. I mean, look at this guy. We know that he's hitting the weights a lot too, and that doesn't always translate necessarily to being a better martial artist. But you still like to see him looking to be in phenomenal shape. I think he's going to be ready to go here. He had the weight issues here, and we'll see how he comes into this fight. We'll see how his weight is and the weigh-ins and whatnot. We definitely got to keep an eye on that, but this is a very entertaining fight. Luke Rockhold will have a 5-inch reach advantage. Luke Rockhold's 2 inches taller. Not a surprise there. Luke Rockhold is the more rangy fighter. Luke should try to strike from the outside and not engage in any type of brawl, because I do see Costa getting the knockout, and that's what I see in general. I see Costa getting the knockout here. I am picking Paulo Costa to win this fight via knockout. I think he hurts him with the head kick. Not sure if he gets the knockout with the head kick, but I think he lands a big head kick at one point in time in this fight. but he will land some heavy shots with this boxing. He can knock him out there as well. Paulo is a minus 325 favorite to win this fight right now. Which way does the line move for this fight? It'll be interesting to see, but he's a big favorite. Nobody really has faith in Rockhold right now just because he hasn't been active and he hasn't really put out a good showing of himself as of recently. But do understand that Luke Rockhold trains with the best of them. He surrounds himself with the best fighters in the world. He is a phenomenal athlete. He's a well-rounded fighter. We know he has jiu-jitsu skills as well down on the mat. He's a well-rounded fighter. Luke Rockhold, the former AKA product, of course, put a lot of work over at Sanford MMA. We know he trains with Jason Perillo a lot as well. Luke Rockhold, the former UFC middleweight champion, we do have to acknowledge if he does show up and looks anything reminiscent to what he was when he was at his prime, he's a dangerous fighter. We also have to just acknowledge that as well. But I think he gets clipped with the big shot. But looks good here. Looks good grappling here. And if he could use some wrestling, I think that would pay dividends for him. We'll see if he tries to use that type of tactic in the fight. But again, give me Paulo Costa by way of knockout. Leon Edwards taking on Kamaru Usman for the welterweight championship of the world. The big moment for Leon. I joked about it in the introduction about, the fact that Leon Edwards just kind of gets disrespected at times, right? We saw the UFC just recently, they were advertising this fight and they accidentally put Jamal Hill's face instead of Leon Edwards' face, right? Just Leon Edwards, his name, the joke about Leon Scott and whatnot. He's a fighter that got two-pieced in a soda by Masvidal in the back. He's a really easygoing guy. He's a real chill guy, which is interesting too because if you didn't know this, he comes from a rough area in England. I believe his dad was some type of gang member or whatnot, or he's in the prison system. But you would never know. I mean, Leon Edwards is he is a class act. And, I like to poke a lot of fun about Leon. But in all seriousness, he's a good dude. And I do have respect for him in that sense. But sometimes when you're that type of fighter, that you come off a little bland, us fight fans, we could be a little bit tough on you at times. And I think that's kind of what the case is with Leon. But that all changes. If he goes out there, becomes the welterweight champion of the world, if he becomes the first fighter to ever defeat Kamaru Usman inside the UFC, of course, Usman only tasting defeat once in his career. Way back in the day, he was submitted by, if you didn't know this too, Kamaru Usman submitted way back in the day, his second pro fight against Jose Caceres. No way. It's funny, his nickname's No Way. It's a perfect nickname. No way he went out there and submitted Kamaru Usman, but he did. And but ever since then, Kamaru Usman is just an absolute beast. A funny story. My brother bumped in to Kamaru Usman and Michael Johnson at a hotel. He recognized Michael Johnson because Michael Johnson had a bigger name. This is way back in the day. And he recognized Kamaru Usman. I messed the story up here. He recognized Kamaru Usman from the Ultimate Fighter show, which is right around this time in 2015. And he said, hey, let me get a picture with you from the Ultimate Fighter. But my brother didn't realize who Michael Johnson was, who was on a previous season of the Ultimate Fighter and was actually more well known. And they kind of joked with my brother a little bit. Like Michael Johnson says, oh, you don't know who I am? And they kind of joked, got a little laugh about it. And my brother showed me the picture, and I said, oh, and my brother really didn't know who that was. And then I said, hey, man, that's Michael Johnson. You should have got a picture of Michael Johnson. He has a lot more promise to be a big-time fighter. Boy, were we off, right? Kamaru Usman, the guy that he got the picture with, is obviously the fighter that has went on to have a way better career, a way more amazing career, a Hall of Fame career, a guy that's potentially the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport right now. He's ranked right now on the UFC website as the pound-for-pound best fighter. Right behind him is Alexander Volkanovski and Israel Adesanya. I do think that those are the only three fighters that you could really argue for right now. Charles Oliveira goes out there and gets a victory over Islam Makhachev, and then Charles is going to be in that discussion too. So, a lot of big fights coming up in the near future to really say, to dictate who is the pound-for-pound fighter. It could obviously change in the near future. And I say that because you guys also know Bo Nickel. Bo Nickel's coming to town too. So is he, he has Alex Pereira in front of him, and then he has Bo Nickel down the line in the next couple of years. But I got a video coming on that. You guys be patient. But back to this fight, Usman has just ran through all these guys again, taking out Leon Edwards back in 2015. Obviously, these fighters are so different from back then. Usman really controlling him in the clinch, pushing him up against the cage, did a lot of work there. I feel like Usman now will have a lot more faith in his hands and will look to try to inflict some damage on Leon Edwards on the feet. So Leon Edwards is very polished there as well. He's super, super technical. He's never out of position with his striking. I shouldn't say never. I mean, obviously Nate Diaz clipped him with a little shot there, but Leon's very technical. I could see Leon having some success there. And if Leon can stuff the takedowns, obviously on the feet, this fight plays out a lot more closely than if he's getting taken down and whatnot, and Usman's just doing his thing. Leon's good in the clinch. He's a well-rounded fighter, and I think that he definitely poses a big threat to Usman. At the end of the day, though, how can you pick against Kamaru Usman in a spot like this? This is a fighter that he's already defeated. He's an absolute fire. Coming off the victory against Colby Covington, it was a close fight. Starching Jorge Masvidal before that, finishing Gilbert Burns. The first fight with Colby, digging deep in the 5th round. I mean, Usman's a stud, man. And I am going to pick Kamaru Usman to win the fight. Now, from a betting standpoint, he's a minus 400 favorite. Another high line. What do you do with that? Leon Edwards is a game fighter. You know he's hungry for this fight. I don't know, man. I can't really say the line's too high and the value's more so on Leon because Kamaru Usman's probably going to show up and get the job done. He's just so game. You're backing one of the best fighters to ever do it, and he just shows up and gets the job done time and time again. If you did mix him a parlay, you're probably going to cash out on that. So that's what I got to say about that. I think Usman wins a decision. I think that he doesn't go out there and put as much of an entertaining fight as he has as of recently. I think he slows it down a little bit, uses some wrestling. I think he goes in cruise control and tries to just walk out the cage with the W here. I think Kamaru Usman gets the job done. That's going to wrap up UFC 278. Kamaru Usman versus Leon Scott. It's a good one. You don't want to miss it. This entire fight card is pretty much stacked, especially with the top three. The top 3 fights are where it's at. I mean, when those 3 fights start to kick off, man, you better be glued to the couch or glued to the bar stool or wherever you're at. We got some entertaining fights taking place, and I'm excited for them. You guys know the routine. I got nothing but respect and love for every one of you guys, especially you guys that are out here watching my video all the way to the end. I appreciate you guys more than you know. Please hit that like button on your way out. And as I always like to tell you guys, be responsible with your bankroll. Be responsible with your management. On your bankroll. Things have been very good for me, as you guys know. We've been really hitting our official plays. We've been really hitting some plays out here. Not even just with MMA, with other sports, baseball and stuff. We've been killing it, and we've had a lot of money come in right now. So what you want to do is you want to be responsible with all that money that's accumulated, and don't get reckless. Because a couple shots of Jameson, one too many beers, before you know it, you're making some reckless moves and you're blowing your account. So be careful, guys, or please be careful with your accounts. Make sure that you're profiting here. Make sure you're getting that money to your bank account. All right, guys? That's how I'll part ways with you. All right? On that note, signing out.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.